Our next speaker also joins us virtually and is someone whose life itself is an extraordinary adventure story. Mr. Gerry Moffatt is internationally regarded as one of the most experienced whitewater expedition leaders in the Himalaya. Over a career spanning more than 35 years, Gerry has led expeditions across the Himalaya, Greenland, Alaska, South America, and Africa, and has been credited with pioneering descents of some of the region's most challenging rivers. National Geographic has referred to him as the most experienced whitewater guide in the Himalaya. An award-winning filmmaker and expedition leader, he has also worked with the National Geographic, BBC, Discovery, and several global adventure platforms combining exploration, storytelling, and outdoor leadership. Today, he joins us virtually to speak on life lessons on risk management. If you're going to be stupid, you better be tough. Gerry, thank you very much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Gerry Moffatt.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, I'm very honored to be included. Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful event. And I thought a lot about the topic in terms of how I now have come to understand the concept of adventure over a lifetime of expeditions and exploits around the globe. And a few years ago, I came across the definition, I actually understood the definition of adventure, which really struck me and has shaped the work that I'm doing today. And the definition of an adventure, when we look at it in the dictionary, actually requires three components. To have an adventure, you have to have risk. There's risk involved in an adventure. You have to put effort in to an adventure. And the third component is that you have to accept that you're moving into completely the unknown, that we have no idea how an adventure is going to turn out. And that's quite revolutionary to actually move into a space where we don't know how things are going to turn out. And I think that people forget that those are the three components that go into making up a successful life. So when we look at things that we can actually live life like an adventure, it becomes quite interesting. So I'm going to hopefully share my screen top right now. Here we go. Get rid of that. Getting used to this technology is an adventure. And here we go, people. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Lessons from a lifetime of adventure. And it does kind of, I think I go back and I do kind of go back to that space of if you're going to be stupid, you better be tough. It, those are hopefully days in the past, but that's certainly how we kind of grew up in the space when there weren't any rules or regulations and we were making things up as we went along. There was no associations, no guidebooks, no rules to what we were doing. Everything we were doing was a first. Everything was an adventure. And my relationship with adventure changed significantly when I was invited on a trip to Everest. And the first thing that you see when you get to Everest is the cemetery. This is on the north side of Everest. And it is a sobering introduction to the mountain and to all the climbers who've died on our slopes, pursuing their hopes and dreams. And the next thing that you notice is how mind-blowingly immense Everest is. Looking up the vast north face of the mountain at 29,028 feet is absolutely daunting. Breathing up here feels like sucking air through a straw. There's 50% less oxygen at base camp.
Sorry to interrupt you here, Gerry, but we are unable to see your presentation.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me share again. Hold on. Oh, here we go, maybe. How about?
Yeah, absolutely good now. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to the beginning, and then we'll hit play here. Hold on. Are we looking at the depressing sight of a cemetery? Yes. Are we good? Can we see that, people? So are we? I can't quite hear you. Are we good to go, everybody?
We're absolutely good.
Okay, great. All right. So that's for Everest, 29,028 feet. Very difficult place to exist. It's not a place that humans were meant to be. It's too high, it's too cold, and it's too barren. And yet, Everest has attracted explorers and mountaineers since it was first surveyed by the British Royal Geographical Society in 1865. And many people consider climbing Everest to be the definition of extreme adventure. But as somebody, myself, who is a kayaker, a river runner, and I'm not particularly comfortable with heights at all, the allure of Everest and mountaineering in general were always somewhat lost on me, despite spending decades of my career in the Himalayas. But many moons ago, I found myself sitting on the north side of Everest about to embark upon one of the hardest challenges of my life. And why I was there forever changed how I came to understand the relationship between risk, effort, and the unknown. So I got invited to join this Everest expedition, but it wasn't just any project, it was a film project about the legendary explorer George Mallory, who many of you might know was the first man who may or may not have summited Everest back in 1924. Our job was to go in and recreate Mallory's story and then potentially rewrite the history books on Everest of whether it was summited well before Hillary and Tenzing in 1953. Now, I was excited about the project. I knew that I was in well over my head. So the first thing that I did was reach out to a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Ed Viesturs, who's credited as America's premier high altitude mountaineer. There are 14 8,000 meter peaks in the world, and Ed was the first American to summit all of them without the use of supplemental oxygen, which is an amazing feat. So Ed gave me two pieces of advice. He said, first, Gerry, summiting is optional. Coming home is mandatory. And number two, prepare yourself. You can pay now or you can pay on the mountain. So the first thing that I did was panic because this seemed like a really daunting prospect. The thing is, you can't just go to Everest and start climbing. The altitude will kill you. You have to prepare yourself physically for many, many months before you go. Now, from base camp at 17,000 feet into advanced base camp, it's about 22 kilometers. And when you get to advanced base camp, or ABC as it's known, you actually begin moving on to the mountain and you climb from ABC up to Camp 1 at a height of 23,000 feet. And you do this numerous times, acclimatizing yourself. Eventually, you spend the night up at Camp 1. And then once you're acclimatized at Camp 1, you begin the process again, moving up towards Camp 2 at a height of 24,750 feet. By the time you get to Camp 3 at 27,000 feet, you've been acclimatizing on Everest for about 6 weeks. Now, I had some comfort going on in the project. I was there to help coordinate the overall production. I wasn't expected to go to the summit. Camp 3 was as high as I was slated to go, but that's still not a cakewalk in terms of the difficulty and the risk, which is why I'd paid really close attention to the preparations and thinking about Ed's advice, you can pay now or pay on the mountain. I'd noticed that the acclimatization schedule looked quite tight. And I think that was because of dollars and cents to do with the production. So, with Ed's advice ringing in my ears, I decided to go out to Nepal before the expedition, trek into Everest Base Camp on the south side, and begin acclimatizing myself well in advance. So, by the time I got to the expedition, I'd already been at altitude for about a month, and that was to pay off significantly because two-thirds of the way through our project, we'd lost about 70% of our crew. It's one thing climbing Everest, it's a completely different thing working on Everest. And when you're working on Everest, you really need that time to acclimatize. We'd lost our team to cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, snow blindness, dysentery, you name it, it hit us. By the time we'd got to Camp 3, we'd shot a lot of the film, but we were down to only a handful of people still functioning on the mountains. So the producer made a call and brought everybody back down to Advanced Base Camp and said, "Look, we've shot most of the film, but we haven't shot the crux of the story, which was Mallory's attempt at the second step. And without that, we just didn't have a film." Now, the second step is a 120-foot pitch of vertical rock. It sits at about 28,000 feet. It's arguably the most difficult part of the climb. In the 70s, the Chinese put in a couple of sections of ladder, but obviously in 1924, when Mallory was there, the ladders weren't there, and the difficulty of the second step was one of the hardest things that Mallory would have had to do if he had made it to the summit. So, in order to stay true to the historical events, we had to remove the ladders from the second step and film our two protagonists free climbing the second step. Time was running out on us. The monsoons were on their way, and the short weather window that you get on Everest was closing. The producer came up and asked me if I thought I could make it to the summit, take a camera, and work as part of the production crew. Now, here I was, a non-mountaineer. I'd been on Everest for about 3 months. I'd lost 30 plus pounds in weight. I'd been working for 6 weeks in and around the death zone above 26,000 feet, where there's not enough oxygen to survive. And I was being offered, no, actually asked to try for the summit. And that circled back into this idea of adventure. There was risk, effort, and certainly moving in towards the unknown. But I'd paid the price ahead of time. I was in great shape. And so I basically said yes. Now, if everything goes well, it's about 16 to 18 hours round trip to go from high camp to the summit and back. You leave at about 1 o'clock in the morning and you start climbing. Now, we had one chance and one chance only to get our shots right on the second step. So we held at a place called Mushroom Rock on the summit ridge. And you can actually see the curvature of the earth. It's quite extraordinary. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God, how the hell did I end up here? Because it's quite intimidating to go from here towards the summit. Now you're really stepping in to a place that's relatively high risk. The cameras were in place, the climbers were ready. We waited for the sun to come up and hit the wall on the second step. And I kid you not, I sat there. The director and the producers were way down the mountains with telescopes and radios, and we were all in position. And I heard one single word come over my radio: action. And on we went. Now, I won't spoil what happened in case you actually want to see the film for yourself, which is on, I think it's on Apple and Netflix. But here's a few moments from our exploits.
George Mallory dreamed of being the first man to climb Everest. He and his fellow climber were last seen 800 feet below the summit. They were never seen alive again. 75 years after Mallory vanished, mountaineer Conrad Anker took part in an expedition looking for their bodies.
This is George Mallory. Oh my God. My God. I'm going to have this chance to go back and see what it was like for Mallory to try climbing Everest in 1924. George Mallory and I, our two paths have intersected 75 years apart.
I know what it's like to be the wife of a climber who doesn't come home.
My dear one, I will be thinking of you as you set off for the summit.
Humans weren't meant to survive this altitude.
Suddenly, temperatures plummet to 20 below freezing. There's no dream. Mustn't be dead.
People often ask me, do you think Mallory summited Everest? And I completely understand that question because we're all focused and conditioned on the summit. But after everything that I experienced on Everest, I think that's missing the point. I kind of ended up knowing that what drove Mallory wasn't the summit, it was the effort. Risk is something all of us try and avoid, but whatever has taught me is that a significant portion of risk can be mitigated through our own efforts, through our willingness to relentlessly prepare, plan, train, suffer our efforts. Ed Viester's advice, pay now or pay on the mountain, isn't just about Everest. It applies to all the opportunities that we get. And the good news is that effort is entirely up to us. My whitewater career in the Himalayas started in 1983, and I worked as a young river guide for 6 years across Nepal. I then went on to northern Pakistan and set up the first river company in in northern Pakistan up in Gilgit, which then, due to geopolitical tension and Taliban and all sorts of um, external threat and risk, came in and kind of took us out of there. I then went over to Bhutan and spent a decade of my life mapping the river systems of Bhutan. And then in 2001, I became the first man to have kayaked all the major river drainages in the Nepalese Himalayas, which had taken me a 20-year quest to do. And then the kind of crowning, the top of my career as a whitewater kayaking took me to the Grand Canyon of the Stikine in British Columbia, which is basically regarded as the most difficult river, one of the most difficult rivers in the world. It's a 3-day battle. Basically, you go to war in this place and you spend a lifetime preparing for it. It is one of the most beautiful, one of the most extraordinary rivers in the world. It is a Grand Canyon. It's like having Half Dome on one side and El Capitan on the other, and this river goes through the middle. And what makes it interesting is that there's what we call must-run rapids. Normally on a river, you can get out and portage and carry your raft or your kayak around. But on the Stikine, you're in, and you're in for 3 days, and you better have it together and you better be ready. So for my sins, after a lifetime of kayaking, adventuring, and exploring, I was offered a wonderful position as the first ambassador to Nepal for adventure travel. Terrific honor. And my first job was to create a series of rules and regulations for the Nepal Association of Rafting Agents, which I thought was great. And I went out and cherry picked from different licensing boards in Idaho, California, Costa Rica, New Zealand, and I put together a loose package that we could potentially bring to Nepal, given the infrastructure and the culture and what was available in the Nepalese Himalayas. And I was about two-thirds of the way through the project, and then a friend of mine from UNDP handed me a report which changed everything in my life because this report came out and it said that 40%, excuse me, of all working age men in the foothills, in the farming areas of the Himalayas, were now working overseas in the Gulf states and Southeast Asia. And what that meant that there was a migration of all their families, millions of people had migrated out of their original farming communities and were now based near infrastructure. And as we know, infrastructure requires roads, and those roads typically go next to rivers. And so people moving upwardly in terms of wanting to have access to hospitals, schools, electricity, and a better life, so to speak, had migrated. Yet the environment and the small towns didn't have any ability to cope with trash and with sewage and so on and so forth, which was then, deposited straight down into the rivers. Nobody's fault, so to speak, because it's just this geopolitical landscape. And you don't realize till after the fact that, fossil fuels being extricated in the Middle East was going to precipitate this massive migration. It was quite interesting. So it kind of blew up my idea of this project and what we could do in terms of because here you've got 60 raft companies that I was about to deliver a report to who are pretty mindful anyway and had a minimal impact on the rivers. So what were we going to do about it? And that's when I got together with some of my best friends in the industry across the Himalayas, and we started the Himalayan Outdoor Education Program. On the left-hand side, my dear friend and business partner, Mr. Mahindra Thapa, who I've known for 40 years. Vaibhav Kala, who you all know from your own organization, a dear friend, phenomenal outfitter in India, leading the charge in so many aspects of quality within his company and impact that he has on everybody, around him. Chotok Serene, an unbelievable kayaker based up in Ladakh. His company's name's Wet and Wild. To the right of me, Ram Sealwal, owner of the Royal Beach Camp in Nepal, longtime kayaking expedition friend of mine. And to the right-hand side, Mr. Min Magar, owner of Paddle Nepal. And what we did was we got together and I pitched these guys an idea. And basically it was this. It was, guys, we need to make a bit of a difference. And what can we do about it? You all run successful businesses. How about we pair each of our businesses up with the local government school, with your local government school, and we start to offer an outdoor education experience to the 10th graders. And the way that we did it, I run a small foundation in the States, so we could afford to pay the outfitters enough to cover our costs and run these programs that I'll kind of explain to you what they are right now. And everybody was right in the door, said, yes, absolutely, we're going to do this. So HOEP, Himalayan Outdoor Education Program, they are 3-day programs. We work with 10th graders. And we basically take these guys onto the river. We run the same kind of river trip that we would run with international clients. They're all group participation. So the kids learn how to paddle effectively, how to pitch their tents, and they go off on an adventure. We camp, the kids do the cooking, the kids do the washing up. And in the middle of this process, we start to bring in a few concepts to them. And what's interesting is that we do the usual, like, what did you learn today? And, oh, I learned to paddle. Oh, I learned to swim. I learned this. I learned that. But then we start to pose questions like, well, what did you learn about yourself? And we also introduce the idea of adventure. Because when we're talking to the kids about potentially what they want to do, Some want to go into the army, some want to be dancers, some want to go into be a doctor. We start to explore what's your path? How are you gonna get there? And we explain this idea that life is an adventure, that first of all, they have to take a risk. So they have to fill in that application. They have to put the effort in. So they got to get grades at school. And then they kind of have to turn the results over and not necessarily know how it's going to turn out. And for young people, that's quite liberating in today's world because they are under tremendous pressure from family and society to kind of know where are you going and what are you doing? And it's not something that actually I think is very helpful. Now, these are the same young people from these areas that are going to be the stewards of their environment. So we also work at a level where we start to talk about environmentalism and sustainability. And that's what's wonderful about the camps that we work with and our outfitters, because they have tremendous best practice when it comes to recycling, when it comes to organization, when it comes to keeping their environment pristine in and around the camp. That trickles down into these kids. And they get to see a way of living in terms of how to dispose of trash and so on and so forth. Spontaneously, and it's funny how you start these things off and they begin to evolve. When we were up in Ladakh on one of the programs, I was walking past the Ladakh Ecological Development Group Center. This was the very first program that I put together. I went in, I asked them what work they were doing, and in Leh, there's upwards of 500 new hotels been built in the last 10 years. And a lot of that water, that black water, is going straight into the ground and has now contaminated the drinking water. And there's E. coli in the underground springs. The Ladakh Ecological Development Group have a phenomenal project underway to implement sewer systems and so on and so forth. And so what we did with our kids was the first thing they do is they go on a tour, field trip with the Ladakh Ecological Development Group, and they get to understand what's happening with their environment. So with HOEP, we're beginning to bring in different NGOs, different layers of expertise. We're kayakers, rafters, and adventurers. We're not, but there's these tremendous resources about connecting. And just as we'd connected the outfitters together, so now we're beginning to connect different NGOs into our program. These are our operations right now up in Leh on the Ganga. We have 3 in Nepal. We're in process to open in Bhutan, and we have one over in Arunachal Pradesh. So it's just fantastic. I love the work. And selfishly, these are the places that I love to go myself. And working with the kids is great. So here's just a little bit. Pictures say 1,000 words. So here's just a little bit about what we do. After 3 years of real world pressure testing, the Himalayan Outdoor Education Program is no longer just an idea. It's been an incredible effort, bringing together schools, teachers, and outdoor professionals in different communities across the Himalayas. From the Zanskar on the Tibetan plateau of Ladakh to the banks of the legendary Ganges, from Nepal's lush Trishuli River Valley to Pokhara's Lake Phua beneath the Annapurnas. We came together with a common goal: to use Mother Nature as a classroom. We came together with a shared belief that young people need authentic experiences to inspire them, to propel them forward with confidence, to help them become better dreamers, change makers, and leaders. A heartfelt thank you to our HOEC partners, schools, outdoor professionals, and donors. Your support and commitment make everything possible. And to everyone who's followed us on this pilot journey, this is just the beginning.
We will need your support in the months and years ahead to continue this amazing effort. Join us in doing what we can with what we have to make this world a little better. We'll see you soon.
So there we have it. I know I've run out of time and talked your ears off, but I want to say thank you so much. And if anyone needs to reach out to me after this conference with any questions, or you're more or need any more information on what we do, I'd be more than happy to connect with you. So thank you for letting me rabbit on, and I really appreciate your attention. And I hope you have a great conference.
Thanks a lot, Gerry. Thanks for your time. It was wonderful hearing you. Thank you.